Have you ever looked at your calendar and thought, I'm booked, but why does my calendar not feel like it? This is a very real problem because you can have clients coming in all day and appointments booked weeks ahead, a wait list, teams that stay busy, and people telling you that business is booming while you're wondering where all your money went, child. Like, where is the money? And this is especially easy to miss because you're good at what you do. You're actually great, and your calendar being full feels like evidence that people like what you sell, that you're doing something right, evidence that your business is working. Your calendar is actually only measuring demand. It isn't measuring your financial health. And today, I want us to look further at the numbers underneath the calendar that can tell a completely different story. So I want you to grab your coffee, get comfortable, whatever you take, and pull up your numbers with me if you can. We're going to look at your business a little differently today because I don't want you to leave this episode simply feeling inspired. I want you to leave with something you can actually check. So let's dive in. Let's talk about a woman that is fully booked. Let's talk about that person you know, or perhaps yourself, because you're busy, baby, and you've been for years. You love your clients and you have repeat customers, you get referrals, and you may have a team now. And from the outside, your business looks really successful. It looks like the business everyone wants, but you're tired. And that's what's confusing, because things don't feel broken and you don't feel like you have permission to feel tired. Because how can you complain that you have a full calendar? That sounds a little ridiculous, right? Disingenuous. How can you complain that things aren't working when people are waiting for an appointment? How can you slow down when there are bills to pay and people are depending on you? How can you do that? So you keep going and you keep adding clients, extending your days, squeezing someone in. Is this starting to sound familiar? Squeezing somebody in, raising the number of appointments you have, adding more services, bringing on other people. And eventually you build a very busy business without stopping to ask a basic question. You need to ask yourself this: is this actually making me enough money? Because what is the point if it's not making you enough money to make ends meet, to make things function? And that's the question I want you to sit with today. Picture someone who spent years building a loyal clientele, perhaps yourself. The books are full and certain services are constantly being requested. So you assume that the services that are being requested are the money makers because they're popular and people are asking for them and the team stays busy performing them. And you look at the schedule and you're thinking, yeah, we need more of this. So you promote your services, you train more people on them, and you build packages around them, and you keep filling up your calendar. Then when you finally sit down and look at each appointment and what it's actually costing the business, the products being used, the amount of services it takes, the employees' time, the portion of rent and utilities, because that all adds up. So we're talking about the software, the supplies, the credit card fees, laundry, administrative time. Look at all of that I just said. We're still going. And all the little expenses that don't seem significant when you look at them individually. But then suddenly your most popular services don't actually look as attractive. Why? Because the real cost is calculated and you're making very little. Isn't that something? And in some cases, you're actually losing money. That's a very hard pill to swallow, that you're working so hard and you're losing money. So imagine doing 30 appointments a month and feeling like you're contributing to your revenue, only to discover that once you account for the actual costs, they're barely contributing to your profit. That's not a good feeling at all. And that's the kind of thing that can stay hidden for years. Why? Because your calendar keeps telling you a very convincing story. It's telling you that you're busy, you're in demand. It's telling you to keep going. Don't stop. But let's face it, busy and profitable are two different measurements, two very different measurements. And this is where I want you to separate revenue activity from financial health. So this is where we dive in. Revenue activity tells you what's happening, and financial health tells you what's left. They are two different spectrums. So if you're watching the calendar and you're only seeing one side of the business, you might know how many appointments you have, how many clients you see, how many revenue came in, how many people are on your wait list, but you need to know which services are actually producing the healthiest margin. You need to know that 100, because that's a different thought process. That's a different conversation. And I want you to really sit with that, because your most popular service may not be your best service financially. Sit with that again. Your most popular service may not be your best service financially, and your longest appointment may not be your most valuable appointment. Your busiest day may not be your most profitable day. And that service that you love selling may not be the service your business can actually afford to keep delivering at that price point. I'm going to pause and give you some time to receive that information. So that's why I don't want you looking at your calendar and making decisions from that alone. The calendar is good, but it lets you know where your time is going solely. And the numbers tell you whether that time is paying you appropriately. So your calendar tells you where your time is going, and the numbers tell you whether that time is paying you appropriately. Here's what I want you to do this week. Don't pull out your entire service menu, because that's going to take a while, and try to diagnose your whole business tonight and analyze. No, we're not doing that. Pick your top 3 services, the 3 that gets booked most often, and I want you to take each one and calculate what it actually costs you to deliver. I want you to start with the most obvious things like labor, like product, and then look at your actual overhead. So we're talking rent, utilities, software, supplies, laundry, processing fees, and expenses that are directly connected to delivering that service. I want you to go through that. And then look at time. This one gets overlooked constantly. We never really consider the time. But if a service takes you about, let's say, 2.5 hours, but you're pricing it like a 1-hour service, then that's actually a problem. If your team spends 3 hours delivering something and the remaining margin is tiny, then that means being booked with that service isn't necessarily a win. You need to know what that appointment is actually contributing, and that may surprise you, because you might discover that your most profitable service isn't the one you thought. And you might also discover that one service needs a price adjustment. That's often the case as you go through this process. And you might realize that you're spending way too much time delivering something for what you're charging. So the price doesn't match the service time frame. Or you might discover that something is working beautifully, and that's useful information too, because now you're making decisions from facts, not assumptions. And we all know what they say about assuming, right? Here's the bigger picture. When your margins are thin, something else eventually pays for it. And that's usually you. Because you work longer, you take more clients, you postpone hiring, you do things yourself, you feel stretched and your team feels stressed, and your standards start slipping. Your personal life starts absorbing the overflow. And suddenly the business is generating revenue, but the owner is paying for the gap with her time, energy. There's a way to structure it where those things are an important part of your business model. We know without it, that's expensive. And it's one of the reasons I don't want you to measure success by how busy you are, because you can be booked solid and still be building yourself right into a corner. I've seen business owners celebrate hitting a revenue number while simultaneously working more hours than they ever have. So when you weigh the cost of the hours against the number, did you really make as much as you thought? The number went up. And so did the cost of producing it. That's why you have to look underneath the number. The goal isn't to have an empty calendar. No, we still want our business to be functioning. It's not to chase profit by stripping the personality out of your business. The goal is actually to know what your business needs from its time, pricing, people, and services so you can make better decisions. Make better decisions. That's the goal. And then maybe that means increasing your price or change how it's delivered or shorten the appointments. Maybe you stop something that isn't contributing enough. Maybe you realize your team needs a different compensation structure, or you need to package something differently, or stop offering something that's not contributing enough. Maybe you find out that you've actually got a very healthy service and you need to put more money or energy behind it. That's what good numbers give you. They give you options, and options gives you room to lead. If you don't know your numbers, every decision feels personal. You start to ask yourself questions like, can I afford to hire? Can I afford to take a vacation? Can I afford to raise my prices? Can I afford to slow down? And you're making those decisions from anxiety because you don't have enough information. So those numbers give you real data, real information. And once you understand those numbers, your conversation changes. Here's your quick assignment. Before the week is over, I want you to pull up your service menu and I want you to choose your top 3 services. And I want you to write down the price charged, the time required, the actual product costs, the labor costs, estimated overhead. And then I want you to ask this question. After everything it takes to deliver this, what is actually left here? Now I want you to write down the answer. Don't judge it. Don't overthink it in the moment. Just get the answer. Because you can't improve anything if you haven't measured it. And I don't want you to exhaust yourself doing this. I don't want you to get overwhelmed when payroll feels tight, when you're wondering why revenue cash isn't up. That's where you're going to do this, because it's going to give you more power to make decisions from a position of information. And if you're listening to this or watching this and thinking that, I know my business is busy, but I'm not actually sure how healthy it is, then I want you to start with my free operational performance scorecard. It's going to give you a broader look at what's happening beyond the calendar. And you can grab it in the show notes. If you want to go deeper after that, you can take a look at the Freedom Blueprint Audit. Now, before you go, I want you to look at your calendar, look at those numbers, and ask yourself, is my calendar making me feel successful, or is my business actually producing the kind of profit and freedom I built it for? Because those are 2 very different things. And if you discover that you're fully booked but financially stressed, do not panic. That's information that gives you a great place to start. See you next time.